Community Analysis, Tarpon Springs, Florida. The main objectives of this presentation is to give an analysis about the history, structure, population, environment, health-related resources, government and public policy, community problems, and the global community issue that affects the city of Tarpon Springs. The early settlers in the city of Tarpon Springs came after the Civil War to start a life near the Anclote River. One of the most significant events in the history of Tarpon Springs was the arrival of the railroad that opened the gates for more economic development. In 1883, the first sponges were discovered off the Anclote River. In 1890, the sponge industry was introduced to the city. In the 1900s, the Greek immigrants came to Tarpon Springs. 1908, the Sponge Exchange was formed, and in 1938, a hurricane devastated the sponge beds. By establishing sponging companies in the late 1800s, Tarpon Springs became the sponge capital of the United States. With the arrival of the first Greek immigrants, the sponging industry was refined with the introduction of the first sponging boats. With the creation of the Sponge Exchange in 1908 came a booming business that is still thriving today. In the 1950s, sponging no longer was a profitable industry. In the 1980s, they found some new sponge beds. And today, sponging is back to making Tarpon Springs a leader in the natural sponge market. Tourism has made Tarpon Springs what it is today. Unfortunately, due to the hurricane in 1938, the damage to the sponge beds, the economy declined. But with the newfound sponge beds in the 1980s and tourism, Tarpon Springs' economy is alive and thriving. Tarpon Springs has a rich history and a culture that attracts thousands of people every year. The city of Tarpon Springs is approximately 16.8 miles with a population of 23,614 residents. Of those 23,614 residents, 819 of those residents are under the age of 5. 3,277 of those residents are ages 5 to 19. 11,543 of those residents are 20 to 59, and 7,975 of those residents are over the age of 65. There are approximately 2,577 people per square mile in the city of Tarpon Springs. Tourism is one of the biggest businesses in the city of Tarpon Springs. The Sponge Docks and the Sponge Exchange are two of the most popular places in Tarpon Springs besides the beaches. There are 6 different preschools ranging from full daycare centers to true preschools in the community. For elementary schools, there are 2 within the city, Tarpon Springs Elementary and Sunset Hills Elementary. And there is 1 elementary school just north of the county line in Pasco County, Gulfside Elementary School. There is only 1 middle school in the city, and that is Tarpon Springs Middle School. There are 2 high schools to choose from, and it depends on which side of the major highway you live on. On the west side of US 19 is Tarpon Springs High School, and on the east side of US 19 there is Eastlake High School. There is 1 main college in Tarpon, and it is the Tarpon Springs campus of St. Pete College. There is 1 public library, and it is considered one of the cultural treasures of the city. There are 4 museums in the area. They include the 1883 Safford House that was originally built as a residence to one of the city's original developers, and there are tours available. The Heritage Museum that is located in Craig Park showcases the development of the city of Tarpon Springs from prehistoric times until World War II. The Lapa Ratner Museum of Art at St. Petersburg College highlights local artists. And the historic train depot in Tarpon Springs Historical Society Welcome Center that is located in downtown Tarpon Springs showcases the history of the city. There is 1 cultural center that was built in 1915 as the original City Hall, and in 1978 it was converted into the Cultural Performing Arts Center. There are multiple churches, with the main ones being First United Methodist Church, St. Ignatius Catholic Church, St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Cathedral, and the Church on the Bayou. And these churches have multiple community outreach programs. These programs include helping with Metropolitan Ministry dinners, bicycle donations, backpacks and school supplies, food pantries, prescription medication, copay assistance, laundry outreach, and homeless assistance. The local attractions include the Sponge Docks and the Sponge Exchange, and there are dolphin tours and sponge cruises available. There are 14 different low-income housing sites in the city of Tarpon Springs. There are dedicated units in 5 apartment complexes, and there are 7 different streets with single-family homes that are owned and operated by the Tarpon Springs Housing Authority. The median income for the residents of Tarpon Springs is $43,048. There are 14.8% of the total population living below poverty, 32.3% of the total population in the middle income status, and 24.6% of the total population living in the upper middle income status. In regards to employment, 55.4% of the population over 16 is employed, and 7.4% of the population is unemployed. The community consists of 20,716 persons who identified themselves as white, 1,434 persons who identified themselves as black or African American, 71 persons who identified themselves as American Indian or Alaskan Native, 329 persons who identified themselves as Asian, and 1,717 persons who identified themselves as Hispanic, 494 persons who identified themselves as 2 or more mixed races, and 24 persons who identified themselves as Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. For the city of Tarpon Springs, there was no data on how many residents have a 9th grade or below education, but in Pinellas County, 3.5% of the total population have below a 9th grade education. 89.3% of the residents of Tarpon Springs have graduated high school. 21.8% of residents in Pinellas County have some college education. 24.2% of residents in Tarpon Springs have graduated college with either an associate's or a bachelor's degree, and 9.5% of residents in Pinellas County have graduated with a master's degree or higher. In Tarpon Springs, there were 105 live births in 2014, and in Pinellas County, there were 8,974 live births in 2014. There was no data available on the number of deaths in the city, but the data from Pinellas County shows that there were 11,340 deaths countywide. The top health issues in the community of Tarpon Springs are heart disease, cancer, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and other STDs. 23.1% of deaths are related to heart disease, and 22.2% of deaths are related to cancer. The leading communicable diseases in the community are chlamydia at 3,939 cases, and gonorrhea at 1,162 cases, and other STDs at 221 cases countywide. There are 14 city parks that are open from 7:30 till dusk. These parks are free to the public and have basketball courts, shuffleboard courts, picnic areas, boat launches, and there is also a dog park. There are 4 county/state parks located in Tarpon Springs and are operated by the state park system. There are fees to going to these parks, and it varies depending on the site. The main trail in Tarpon Springs is the Pinellas Trail that runs from northern Tarpon Springs to St. Petersburg. Police services are provided mainly by the Tarpon Springs Police Department and with a backup from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department depending on the circumstances. Fire services are provided by the Tarpon Springs Fire Department. There are 3 stations that provide services to the city, stations 69, 70, and 71. There is a 7.5-minute response time dictated by the county, but in some parts of the city, the response time is greater due to traffic in the area. The addition of Station 71 has decreased the response times to the areas north of the Anclote River. EMS services are provided by Sunstar Paramedics. The water supply to the city of Tarpon Springs is supplied by a partnership with Pinellas County. The sewage disposal in the city is operated by the city. All garbage is picked up by Waste Management on Mondays and Thursdays. There are facilities in Pinellas County for disposal of solid and hazardous waste. For Pinellas County, there is mosquito control via land and air. And for any wild or nuisance animals, residents are encouraged to call animal control. The main area of concern for the environment is the Stauffer Chemical Company, which was situated on 158 acres of land next to the Anclote River. The site is bordered by residential homes, an elementary school, and commercial land. The plant processed elemental phosphorus and from phosphate ore from 1947 to 1981 when the plant was shut down. In the time that the plant was up and running, there were some 500,000 tons of chemical waste disposed of there. The plant structures were demolished in 1991 and 1992, and the 17 unlined lagoons were backfilled. The contaminants found in the soil and groundwater on multiple testings from 1977 to 2015, and they include heavy metals, radionuclides, polynuclear chromatic hydrocarbons, and elemental phosphorus. There have been multiple studies of the soil and groundwater over the years and multiple projects to clean up the violations. In 2013, the Department of Environmental Protection gave permission to the city of Tarpon Springs to build a 64 million gallon per day reverse osmosis membrane water treatment facility just south of the site. The main healthcare facility in the city of Tarpon Springs is Florida Hospital North Pinellas, formerly Helen Ellis Memorial Hospital. There are 5 assisted living facilities, 2 special needs services, 2 nursing homes, and 4 walk-in clinics within the city of Tarpon Springs. The Healthy People 2020 objectives chosen for this community are HDS2, the reduction of deaths related to coronary artery disease, C-1, the reduction of overall death rates related to cancer, STD-1, reduction in the proportion of adolescents and young adults with chlamydia, and STD-6, reduction of gonorrhea rates. Being that the leading cause of death in Pinellas County is heart disease, it is a top priority for this community. According to Healthy People 2020, high blood pressure and high cholesterol are major contributors to cardiovascular disease. Since cancer deaths are at the top of the list for Pinellas County, Healthy People 2020 objective of reducing cancer death rates applies. The rate of cancer deaths globally is 179.3 per 100,000, and that needs to change. With the current advances in cancer detection and treatment, people with cancer are living longer. Since the top 2 communicable diseases in this community are sexually transmitted diseases, they also need to be addressed. It is estimated that there are over 19 million new cases of STDs every year. The prevention of these STDs starts with primary care. The mayor of the city of Tarpon Springs is David Archie. The vice mayor is Jeff Larson, and the commissioners are Townsend Terrapani and Rhea Sieber. The meetings are held the first and third Tuesdays of every month and are open to the public. The meetings are also recorded and available via YouTube. I was able to review the city's budget for the next fiscal year, and the one main shortcoming I found was that there was not a lot of money being allocated to emergency management. Given the fact that the city lies in the Gulf of Mexico, I would have thought that they would have allocated more than $15,000. The number 1 overall community problem is heart disease. 23.1% of the residents have died from heart disease. It is the leading cause of death for the city, and 1 in 3 adults live with heart disease. There has been research to prove that community-based programs have been shown to be effective in lifestyle modification in those with heart disease or at risk for heart disease. The American Heart Association has recently changed its focus from decreasing the disease burden to prevention of the disease. The second overall community problem is cancer. 22.2% of the residents have died from cancers. It is the second leading cause of death in this community. 161.4 deaths per 100,000 die from cancer globally. In 2010, there were 1,596,670 new cancer diagnoses. Prevention, education, and services may stop cancer from happening, or it may improve the patient's outcome because of early detection and treatment. Nurses, especially primary care nurses, are a big part in prevention, as nurses are some of the first contacts patients make when they enter the healthcare system. The overall community problem number 3 is sexually transmitted diseases. As stated on a previous slide, the numbers of chlamydia and gonorrhea and other sexually transmitted diseases are shown on the slide. Sexually transmitted diseases incidence is the highest in the population that is under 25. but new research is emerging that there is an increase in the older population developing STDs. It has been tradition that we target sexual well-being to the younger population, and now nurses are finding that they need to change gears a little bit and focus on the older population as well. The function of the public health nurse in these cases is varied, but it includes teaching safe sex practices to all members of the community, not just one particular group. The global community issue in this community is cardiovascular disease. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death not only in this community, but in the United States. In the next 5 years, cardiovascular disease will be a significant cause of disease burden globally. Lifestyle modification is key. By providing community-based interventions that are culturally and economically relevant, that focus on lifestyle modifications, including diet, physical activity, and quitting smoking, are the keys to change locally and globally. Improving access to prevention programs needs to be thought of more critically, as just by improving the access does not mean that they will work for specific populations. Prevention and lifestyle modification is essential.